Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is my eating disorder story. But before I get into that, I just want to give a little disclaimer. I'm not going to be sharing any pictures from when I was in my eating disorder, and I'm also not going to be talking about specific numbers or ways that I restricted my food. I just don't want this video to be any more triggering than it already is. And I want this video to be motivation for you girls out there and guys too to get out of an eating disorder and not to perpetuate the problem. I know for me, when I was really sick and in a dark place with my eating disorder, I would actually watch other eating disorder stories on YouTube to have pictures to look at and other ways to restrict that maybe I hadn't thought of. And so I don't want this video to be like that for you girls. I want this to be helpful and to help you feel like you're not alone. My eating disorder really kind of started at a young age. I can remember when I was 3, 4, 5 years old, and I had this concept of whether someone was bigger or smaller or normal. And I'm not really sure what allowed me to have that concept, because my mom was always really healthy, my dad was healthy, and so I didn't have Instagram, obviously. I don't even think that was around back then, but I had this concept. Nonetheless, I was active, I ate healthy, I was a normal height, I was a normal weight, I was growing, everything was good. Now, fast forward a few years, I think I was around 5th or 6th grade, I went to the doctor. Now, they use the BMI chart. I'm in the States, so I don't know if they use that in other countries as well, but my doctor basically told me, you don't want to be the fat girl. And that's exactly what she said. And at that time, my weight was perfectly normal. Like, I wasn't overweight, I wasn't underweight, I was right in the middle of that BMI scale. Same with my height. So I was perfectly healthy. And she told me this, and I walked out of that appointment, and I felt like, oh, something's wrong with me. Like, she must think I'm gonna be the fat girl. So I was like, okay, by next year's appointment, because that was my yearly checkup, I'm gonna lose a couple pounds. Now, remember, I'm a child, I'm 5th or 6th grade, I'm still getting taller, so my weight should still increase a little bit with my height. But now I had it in my mind that I wanted to lose a couple pounds by the next year. And so in my mind, it was perfectly healthy. I wasn't trying to, get anorexic. I didn't even know what anorexia was. But what I did is I cut out soda. I just started cleaning up my diet like you do when you start eating healthier. And I remember I lost the few pounds that I wanted to pretty quickly. And I was open with my parents about what I was doing, and it was very innocent at first, and I still looked very healthy. So then the next year appointment came, and I had lost a couple pounds since my previous appointment. So at that point, my doctor didn't make any comment about my weight, and I was like, oh, if I am skinnier, if I weigh less, I won't be thought of as the fat girl. And so that little comment from my doctor really stuck with me, especially as I entered middle school. And so my biggest fear was being the fat girl. And I'm using that terminology just because that's what my doctor said. I don't like labeling people as fat or skinny, but for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to quote what she said. So anyways, around 6th grade, it started turning into a more unhealthy relationship with food, and I really started to cut back. And so by the time I entered 7th grade, I was really skinny. And so I never really lost a significant amount of weight. I think I really only lost like 10 pounds from that initial doctor's appointment. But remember, I was still growing, so I was still getting taller, so my frame was getting smaller and smaller and smaller, which wasn't healthy. So I continued restricting. I was afraid to gain muscle. I was afraid to get fat, in my mind. And so I wanted to look toned. I wanted to have abs. I wanted to have long, lean muscles, but I was afraid to work out because any type of exercise, in my mind, would go on as muscle, which now I know a lot more about nutrition and fitness. That's not exactly how it works. But anyways, back then I said, okay, I can do yoga. I know I won't gain muscle, but I'll be able to tone my muscles. So for about 2.5 years, I would wake up almost every day, even on like Christmas and holidays, at 5 a.m. and I would do yoga for like an hour. And if I didn't do it, I felt like I was failing, and I felt like I was becoming the fat girl. And so I never really recognized that I had an eating disorder during the whole eating disorder itself. But I knew in the back of my mind that it wasn't right, because I would have to make up these excuses, and really they were lies about whether I had eaten, whether or not I was hungry. And I was very aware that I looked very bony. And so I would wear bulky sweaters and sweatshirts and things that covered up my bones because I was bony. And even though I knew I couldn't really see that in the mirror, I had some body dysmorphia, and I still saw myself a lot bigger than I was. And when I look back at those pictures, I'm like, I remember what I saw when I looked in the mirror, and it wasn't this. So I can do a whole nother video about body dysmorphia to help you girls with that, because that's a whole nother can of worms. But I would cover myself up with those clothes, and I would just try so hard for no one to notice, because I didn't want someone, my parents, my doctors, to notice that I was underweight or that I was malnourished, because I would have to start eating again. And for me, if I started eating again, I would gain weight and I would become the fat girl. So I remember before all my doctor's appointments, I would be categorized as underweight. So I would drink a crazy amount of water, because if I could drink that water and then not go to the bathroom and pee it out before they weighed me at the doctor's, it would amp up my weight a little bit so I didn't look as malnourished. And so I would do the calculations. I'd drink however many, ounces of water would equal a few pounds, and it was crazy, and I'd be really antsy and need to go to the bathroom, but I'd have to wait until they would weigh me. And so that was just twisted and messed up in itself, and really not healthy. I ended up losing my period. I was not feeding my body what it needed. And so I think 5th grade is when I initially started my period, and I had one period before I lost it. So it was at that time where my doctors didn't really think anything of it, because it's normal to have an irregular period, especially when you start going through puberty. But for me, I didn't have that next period for like 2.5 years. So in my mind, I knew I wasn't nourishing my body. I knew I wasn't eating enough. And this is like 8th grade. And I'm getting scared. I'm like, what if I can't have kids? What if I ruined my body? I need to see a specialist, because I don't want to start eating again, but I also want to be able to have kids someday. And I remember all those thoughts. It would be so hard to concentrate at school, because I was calculating how many pounds I wanted to lose by the next week. And how it worked for me was, if I would not eat for this week, but I could get to go to dinner with my family on, Friday or Saturday night, then I wouldn't have to worry about what I was eating, and no one would notice that I wasn't eating. So I'd restrict, and then have a normal size meal, which was still a very small meal, but normal enough that no one would notice. And I would do that. So I was always a pretty constant weight. So I wasn't losing. I was losing, and then I'd eat a little bit, and then you get the point. So that cycle continued. I still didn't have my period, and the end of 8th grade came. I remember my mom and I went shopping, and I always hated going shopping because we would try on clothes. And when you try on clothes, you're in the dressing room with your mom, you see each other's bodies, right? I was terrified of her seeing me, because my collarbones were so bony that it was undeniable that I was malnourished, I was underweight. And it was that day that she looked at me and she said, I had no idea you were this skinny. And so that night, my parents sat me down and they said, you have a choice. You can get better on your own and gain the weight that you need to be healthy, or we're going to admit you to the hospital. And in my mind, I was so terrified to be admitted, because from the videos that I watched, and just I had a twisted perception of what health was and what being weight restored meant. I associated going to the hospital with being forced to eat a crazy amount of food and becoming the fat girl. So it always circled back to that comment from my doctor. And so around that same time, I slowly started eating normally again, and I went to I'm not sure what kind of specialist it was, but it was about my period. And the day I had that appointment, I got what would be considered a period. It was not normal, but it was, 2.5 years late, so we can imagine what that was like. And we were talking to the doctor, and she could tell that I was obviously struggling with an eating disorder, because I was still very slender and underweight. And we were talking, and I brought up that comment from my doctor, and she's the one that actually put those pieces together and actually wrote a very long letter to that doctor's office, saying, like, you potentially could have influenced an eating disorder on this child, which is really sad, because I know that doctor did not mean anything bad by that. I know she would never want to have anyone have an eating disorder. So at that point, I started, I think it was summer before I started high school. So I started eating, and I gained the weight I needed to gain to be considered weight restored. And I was back to a weight that was perfectly healthy for my height. I was no longer underweight, wasn't overweight, but in my mind I was huge, because I had gone from one extreme to healthy, which was basically going from one extreme to another extreme in my mind. And so I was terrified to start high school. I'd only been at one school my whole life. It was a private school, so really small classes. I only knew like 5 people, and I was afraid to go to high school because it'd be all these new people, and what were they going to think about me? And I was really insecure. And so although I looked healthy and had gained the weight I needed to, I was still really low on the inside. I was still so self-conscious, and I really hated myself. And when I started high school, I was so hyper-focused on how I looked, my eating disorder. I was still trapped in those really negative thoughts that I just cycled into this depression and anxiety, and it really took me down a path that I didn't want to be on. And it was really difficult for me, especially freshman year and sophomore year. I struggled a lot, and I wasn't myself. I wasn't the person that I am today at all. And when I look back to that girl, freshman and sophomore year, I can't recognize her. Like, I speak about myself in the third person during that time because it's so off from who I am now. And so I was recovered, but my mind wasn't. And so it took a lot of years and a lot of work and growth and maturity to recover that part of my mind. And so gaining the weight, that was the easy part, from going underweight to normal weight. But gaining the mental clarity and restoring my mind after that eating disorder, that was the hard part. And this is where, I'm going to try not to cry, but this is where God really worked in such a cool way for me. And so, freshman year I started in high school. I was at this new school, new kids, I was trying to make friends. It was hard for me, but I met this guy named Marco, and we were really good friends. And I'd have my guy issues that I'd talk to him about with the boys I thought were cute, and then he'd have his girl things, and we'd talk. And during my bouts with depression, I would talk to him, and I would tell him what was going on, and he would talk to me. And there was a point where I was very low, and I was dealing with some suicidal thoughts, and I was really in this place of contemplating taking my life. And it was a phone call that I had with Marco, who is this guy, and he said just these simple words, which goes back to how weighty words can be, but he said, "I'm going to see you at school tomorrow." And it was just that little bit of care and that thought that this person is going to see me tomorrow, and they want to see me tomorrow at school. And that was enough that night to get me to the next day. And so there were little things that got me to the next day, in conversations a lot with Marco, some other friends that I had, and YouTube. A lot of YouTube helped me at this time, learning about loving your body and learning about being the person that you want to be. Because at this time, I was really negative. I didn't like myself. I would go as far as to say I hated myself for how I looked. I hated myself for how I acted, all this. And I was sad. I felt so empty and so just idle. And I really didn't think that I had a purpose. So I think at this point, we all kind of see where this friendship with Marco went. We ended up starting a relationship sophomore year. And we were both, immature kids and had our own issues going on. So it was your typical high school relationship. We had our breakup moments and so on and so forth. But as the years went on, we really worked to help each other out with our issues, and him specifically with my eating disorder, really questioning, habits that I had with my self-talk, because we would be honest about how we talked to ourselves, what we thought about ourselves, and we both struggled with confidence. And so he would challenge those ideas that I had about myself, and whether it was about my body or it was about how I acted or how I looked, whatever, he would challenge that. Now I am a freshman in college, and I'm still dating the Marco from the story. And this past year, so senior year of high school going into freshman year of college, is the year where all of that work that I put in, and it wasn't a lot of work all at once. It was a little bit here, a little bit there, fall back off track, and then get back on again. But this was the year I could see the progress. I could see I'm making it back to a place where I can say I love myself. And that's something I have not been able to say probably ever in my life since I was probably 6 years old. And I can say, yeah, I make mistakes. No, I'm not perfect, which is hard for me because I'm a perfectionist. But I still love myself. And so in my story, God really used this friendship and this relationship with my boyfriend, and who was my really close friend before that, to help support me through this and to help challenge those negative thoughts and those skewed ideas that I had about what health was, mentally, physically, spiritually, all of that together. And I think for me, in my story, that's what God did. But for you, God may have another way that he is going to work through you in your eating disorder, and how he's going to bring you out of, whether it's your eating disorder, it's depression, anxiety, whatever. And so I was talking to Marco the other day and my idea for this video, and I told him, I said, I want to be a Marco in other girls' lives, because he really helped to spark the change in my thoughts and what I thought about myself. And so I want to be that for you girls. And I know I can't, talk back and forth with you in live time, but I want to be a support for you, because I know it is so hard to be a girl in society today with all of the Photoshop and everything going on and the unrealistic ideals set for females in this world, and males too. We'll group everybody in here. But I am here for you. I've lived it. I know how hard it is to hate yourself, to not want to be here anymore. And I want to be here for you, to give you a reason to remind you that you have a purpose, even if you can't see it right now. And you don't have to stay in this cycle of depression and anxiety and disordered eating and disordered thoughts. You can break free. And God may use, a friend in your life. He may use your family. He may do it just through you. But I want to remind you in this video that you can do it. And I did not believe that I could do it. And it took having Marco believing that I could do it for me to do it and recover and be at a place now where I can say, I love my body, even though I don't have the perfect body. I still have bad body image days, but I still love my body. I'm still working to be the girl and the woman that God has called me to be. And so if there's anything you can take away from this video, it's that you have a purpose, and that I see you, even though I can't see you. I know those struggles. I know how hard it is. But aside from that, God sees you, and he knows how much it hurts and how hard it is. So I know I was kind of vague in, the ways that I restricted and, not sharing photos. It's hard to kind of imagine what my specific story was, but that's okay. Your story is what matters, okay? My story is mine, and that's what made me into the person I am today, but you are the main character in your story that God wrote. And so if he decided to write you into your story as the main character, doesn't that mean that you have a pretty big purpose in this world? I just want you to know you are amazing. I love you. I hope this video gave you some motivation to break free from any eating disorder or negative thoughts or lack of self-love that you may have. And if you have any ideas of what you'd like me to talk about next, please leave them in the comments below. I love you girls so much, and I am praying for you, even though I don't know you. I know it is so hard, but I am here for you. I am supporting you, and I am rooting for you. I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye!